Hello and welcome to the Sky Fantasy Football Podcast. Paul, we're back. How was your summer, Daddy?
Yeah, birth of little girl 4 weeks ago. So been a different summer to many previous. Quite glad for the break from football, to be honest.
Indeed. How have you been spent? Are you sweltering? I'm absolutely sweltered today, Paul. I must say, I've had to bring a hanky. We need temperature check around the country. So I'm in South Wales at the moment, and I think I'm at 31 degrees, which doesn't seem a lot, but I am tucked up in an attic. How is it in Hibernian?
In Hibernian, yeah, Dunfermline, it's 31
Dunfermline,
as
not
well.
Hibernian. Sorry, Dunfermline.
All good, all good. That's 31 here as well. So yeah, pretty toxic weather for us
I've
Northerners.
seen in London it's 36, and tomorrow it's going to be about 39. It's going to be absolutely crazy. Just to say before we start, I've banged the machine. I'm trying to get everything working as quickly and as well as possible. I am having some lagging issues, so if it does lag for 10 or 20 seconds, please try and hold on if you can, because it does come back. But yes, blown off the dust. Off the laptop, got everything set up with some lag. I don't know if it's the heat or or some other stuff, but it is lagging a bit on my side. We'll try our best to carry on. Lewis says Manchester 36 degrees, checking in. Please let us know in the chat how hot it is where you are. It would be a really good starting point for the season. Just quickly before we start, Fantasy Football Hub, you can join now for 50% off. And you also get your money back if you don't win your FPL mini league. So check out our site now if you haven't already for all our amazing fantasy football resources and the T's and C's for the money back offer. So Sky FF, Paul, what are we looking at today?
First of all, three big changes for the 2022-23 season. So we've got 50 transfers instead of the usual 40. Got one overhaul instead of two overhauls, and that'll happen at the World Cup. So that's from Sunday the 13th of November to Monday the 26th of December. There'll be unlimited transfers in that period of time, and no man of the matches. So those often disputed man of the matches given by reporters, often backdated, changed, updated. That's completely gone now. There's nothing there to replace that.
What are your thoughts overall, Paul, on the game? Because I must say, very quickly, I'm incredibly excited because at first, when I was looking at it first, I was feeling a bit, change. I'm not sure about change. But you know what? I think the unlimited transfer, the overhaul during the World Cup at 50 transfers, I think is an incredibly good balance because I live the Telegraph game as you do. And I think it lends itself more to that season-long strategic play rather than just these 4 weeks, 8 weeks, 8 or 10 weeks at the end. I'm really excited for the season. I think it's going to be brilliant. I think it's almost like a brand new game that you could I was thinking about it, and if I could design a game, this would be how I think it would look. And bear in mind, Sky has got the best gameplay as well. How are you feeling about it?
Yeah, I'm pretty happy. I would still prefer no overhauls, 40 transfers. But I mean, I'm more happy with 50 and 1 than I am with 40 and 2 at the stages they were at last season. I just think that the template formed really quickly. The building a team for 4 game weeks, I'm not overly keen on. It was always at the first international break, which was after 4 game weeks for the first overhaul. So yeah, I wasn't overly keen. And I think you're right, it does lend itself to changing up tactics slightly. We've been overly cautious on using transfers before. Yeah. We've obviously averages out more at kind of 1.2, 1.3 transfers per game week now. So definitely allows for deploying different tactics. We have seen that over the last couple of seasons though with COVID and stuff. I changed the way that I started playing Sky a little bit. I was often a person that was planning 6-7 game weeks in advance, and that had ultimately changed, and I think this is going to change again.
Really interesting. Before we look at and chat about transfer strategy, let's get on to the really important stuff. Ben McCrum says it's a cool 29 in Belfast. Liam says it's 30 in Ireland, rain on the way tomorrow. Tom says 34 in Bristol. Phil says 33 in Bury, about to go and play 7-a-side. Good luck with that. Red Mist Red, first time live. Great to have you with us. Dan Cox says Norwich 37. He's trumped everyone so far. Ian says 36 in Rugby. Kicking up dust. Aberdeenshire 32. It's boiling. I bet you're melting there. Sean Gannon 35. Matt Woolley 30.7 in Southwest Devon. Welcome one and welcome all. Great to have you back with us. And Manchester says yes, definitely welcome the rule changes. So just in terms of transfer strategy, we had a million questions, right? We're not going to be able to kind of run through them all because we'll be here all night. But what are your kind of initial thoughts of transfer strategy, Paul? Because I think I think it's about 17 weeks worth of games and then 21 after. So if you kind of pro-rated that, say it would be, I don't know, maybe 21 and 29 potentially or something along those lines. Would that be the way you would kind of look to play this, or would you look to play it a bit more like standard TFF, where you would only look to probably use maybe 10 or 15 and then really, really attack the second half of the season?
Yeah, so I'm thinking of Simple Goal mentioned this in his questions, and then it was asked elsewhere. But I'm thinking of playing relatively aggressive to start with. As in get 2 or 3 weeks worth of data, rejig my team to the team that I want then, plus you get like a fixture swing at that point in time, then try and sit out transfers for a little period, and then use some in the middle, and then again not use many just before the World Cup. So I'm thinking, I think you're right, there's 16 game weeks prior to World Cup and 22 afterwards, so that's what 42%, so 21 transfers. I think if I got to the World Cup with kind of 18 transfers used-ish, somewhere around that, kind of high teens, I think I'd be pretty happy, and that's my current rough plan of where we're going.
Okay. If we look at some players then, we just talk about strategies that impact on certain players. You asked me to bring up Salah, KDB and Gallagher. So what are you thinking with these players? Yeah,
so I'd mentioned scrapping the man of the match this season. So if anyone's using a points per million metric to try and understand value in players and how that would then fit into a value team this season, these are the 3 players that picked up the most man of the match awards last season. So Salah picked up 10, so 3 points for man of the match, 30 points. KDB and Gallagher both picked up 8 man of the matches, so 24 points. I often think that these players are captained as well, so you're doubling those man of the match points. So you're effectively doubling your 30 points from Salah to 60 points. Don't tend to fit that into the models, and there's that balance of ownership, high explosiveness against value as well. I'd seen a couple of questions about Salah and whether or not I would go the start of the season without him. On my lunch, I checked the update, like the score updates, and Fulham at full strength were getting beat 3-0 off someone at half time. I think it was Real Betis. Liverpool play Fulham on their first opening day of the season. I didn't have him when he got the hat trick against Leeds on the opening day of the season 2 or 3 years ago. I just think that's definitely not something that I would consider based on the way that I play the game, and with the additional transfers this season, that if I didn't think that Salah was value or that I was going to captain him for a stretch, then I'd happily take him out. But since I think he will be the most highest captained on that first weekend, then I'll definitely be starting with him.
It's really interesting because for players like Salah, Kane, Haaland, say, and all these sorts of players, it does have the potential to knock 6 points off every time and make it not such a scary prospect of going without them. So if we just say, Salah needs 2 goals to score, what would that would be 15 points with tier 2 shots bonus, which is probably the max he could get in a game if he scored a brace. He doesn't tremendously often score a brace. He did it the first half of last season, definitely not in the second. But 15 points, do wonder if you could offset that against going with a Van Dijk for 10, who will Van Dijk will score 10 more than Salah will score 15, right, over the season. That that goes without saying. And I think with that in mind, I think this is something I'm kind of looking at my strategy, and obviously we would all love to have Salah, Haaland, and maybe Kane or Son or wherever else, but I am wondering whether they're kind of big at the back. Again, for those who are watching and listening and don't play the Telegraph game, the Telegraph game is all around the value at the back. The only difference between the two games now are the shots bonus and tackle bonus, really, aren't they? As in it is as a massive impact. Captaincy. But as I say, for a striker to score a couple of goals, it doesn't happen tremendously often. What's your thinking on that now in terms of these premium strikers?
So my thought is that if I go through a period of time, so I will start with Salah, or providing any last minute information that he's not going to be available or not. But if there's a period of time where I'm not going to captain Salah, I'd be more inclined to transfer him out for another player, gain a game, gain a captaincy somewhere, run 3 or 4 games without him, knowing that I wasn't going to captain him in that period of time anyway, and then perhaps switch back to him. Whereas I'd be less inclined to do that in previous seasons, I think.
Yeah, I think I was looking at the kind of premium spots in terms of team structure. I think we mentioned the end of last year. We say at the end of every season how team structure and price points are probably the most important thing we need to kind of focus on. And I think I've identified can probably get 3 premium price points across the team. If I get 4, all of a sudden it gets quite tight. I'm even talking about Van Dijk, Cancelo, Salah, and either one of Haaland or Kane, for example, or Son. Yeah. Even having just those 4 gets quite tight, because it means you can't have Laporte and you premium keeper, and you're really kind of digging deep then for these 6 million enablers and stuff. So what's your thinking on that at the moment? Are you thinking of kind of potentially saving, 4 premium price points across your team to rotate in and out for captaincy and for the for 3-for-1s and things?
Yeah, if I take out the defenders, because I think I would just sit and stick with the defenders. I'm thinking kind of 3 positions into 2, so 2 attacking premiums I think that I'll have as opposed to 3. So whether that's Kane, Son, Salah, Haaland, I think it's going to be 2 of those, and whether I use transfers to rotate those or transfers to pick in kind of that budget enabler when they finally emerge after 2 or 3 game weeks.
Yeah.
I think a use of kind of 3 or 4 transfers, perhaps with a couple of rotations and perhaps a couple of players that I know that I'm going to want in longer term that emerge from the first 2 or 3 game weeks. I think that's going to be the rough way that I'm going to go.
Yeah, I agree. Sorry. You go.
On the man of the match point as well, from last season, defenders got only 19% of man of the matches, forwards got 28%, goalkeepers only 6%, and midfielders 47%.
Wow.
So you can see a lot of midfielders are going to be hampered by this.
Okay. For those who've joined us late, just to say apologies. No, the video quality isn't the best. Having some lag for some reason. Hopefully the audio is making up for it. But if it does get to a point where it is unwatchable, please let us know in the chat. But hopefully it's staying okay at the moment. Okay, let's have a look at some other players then, Paul, you got your eye on.
Yeah. So you're mentioning there about perhaps the re-strategizing to go big at the back, and that's something that we always talk about, but this might even be even more prevalent this season than it was in previous seasons. Those 5 players up on screen, so we've got Hugo Lloris, Ederson, Laporte, Robertson and Van Dijk. Want to hazard the guess of why those 5 players are shown there, Fergi? Stats based,
are they? I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
Stats based. I thought they were up there because they were 5 players who are not quite in that top premium expensive bracket. You could maybe go and down, but stats based. No, I don't know.
But so all 5 players
appearances.
So all 5 players scored over 200 points last season and didn't pick up a single man of the match award.
Wow. Okay.
So again, highlighting, there's 3 defenders there from premium teams, like 2 Liverpool, 1 Man City. they won't be hampered at all by the reduction of the man of the match points if you're using a value-based model to look at their performance from last season. And again, showing value in 2 premium goalkeepers as well, highlighting the fact that perhaps we overlook premium goalkeepers in this game and always look for the saves bonus from players further down the league.
I agree. I think the keepers then, we did have a question around, strategy over keepers, and especially with the, no man of the matches now again. I just feel like I wouldn't want to go without a premium keeper. I don't see the need. It saves on transfers. The only time you could, maybe do it is where, Nick Pope and others historically, Martinez the season before, have historically performed really well, with captaincy and stuff. But I still don't think there's enough in it. And the only way I'll not be having a premium keeper is if I'm trying to just, eke out, 0.5 million to get the perfect outfield team. But even then, it's going to take a lot for me to go not without Alisson or Edison, I think, personally. What are your thoughts on keepers still? I know we cross swords on this, don't we, sometimes?
Yeah, I think the only one that I might be... I mean, Alisson's a standout for me based on... He's not in here because he picked up a man of the match award, but the fact that he picks up, or was picking up, saves bonus in regularity, along with his clean sheets bonus as well, that I'd consider Alisson. I also like Dean Henderson. He's only 6.5 million. Forest covers a couple of captaincies early. Forest do look a good defensive team and have been have back-to-back clean sheets in pre-season as well. I don't know how, if Yates is apparently out at the start of the season. He plays in defensive midfield position. I know they've just signed they've signed Toffolo, who's a left back from Huddersfield, and O'Brien from Huddersfield as well, who's a decent player. I don't know if how Yates being out will impact them defensively. I think Scott McKenna is really overrated, but that's my having watched them play in Scotland more than anything else. But we've seen what Henderson did when he played for Sheffield United that season, that the Blades came up. So Henderson maybe, but I think I'm looking at a premium goalkeeper this year.
And just talking of Forest, obviously Brennan Johnson, the Welshman, 7.2 million. You would guess just due to the lack of budget enablers available, that he would be quite popular. I would think he's certainly in my draft at the moment. Would that put you off Henderson?
Perhaps. I guess it's how you're setting up your team. If you do want to go with an additional premium to what we've said, then you're going to have to put another budget enabler in somewhere, and whether that's the double up with 2 Forest players, or finding one really cheap player that's playing perhaps at 6.5 million in midfield or defence to allow you to do that. It's one of 2 ways. Just now I'm set on going premium goalkeeper though, I think, and then perhaps 2 7-ish million players in my team, and then fighting my way out from there.
Okay, and the final change was some player position changes, but you wanted to highlight Romero and Son as well.
Yeah, so this was about how I think that Sky's done a tremendous job of their pricing this season. Romero is potentially the one outlier in that I think that they've probably underpriced him. What I was surprised at is that Eric Dyer's ownership currently is higher than Romero's, and he's 0.6 more. So I think that both look kind of locks to play. Dyer in the middle and Romero on the right-hand side of the back 3. I think he's slightly underpriced, and hence I expect his ownership to kick on from the 7% it's at just now. But looking at Son, I mean, I think that's a perfect example of how they've priced the player really, really well, because if you look on, he's at 32% owned. You saw how he finished the season off last season. If they had kept a similar price and hadn't changed them, or even a positional change, I think the positional change, you're adding in the extra point for a goal from a midfielder, but it's that whole structure thing that completely changes the dynamic of the structure of your team. I used to like it when Sterling and Son and Salah, etc., were midfielders, and you had Hazard at the time. It felt like there was a lot more choice in there with KDB and in others. Bruno, perhaps, if he picked up a bit of form again. So I think they've done a fantastic job. Increased the base of defenders a little bit. So Cancelo's up to 11 million. And the backup defenders, I think they've increased the price of a little bit as well, which is helped, so that if you do get a run in for perhaps Chalobah from Chelsea, he's 8.3, so it's not as easy as kind of default into him, even if you knew he was going to play for the 10 weeks or so.
Okay, I'm getting a bit of encoder overload, and apologies for this, everyone. Hopefully it's still watchable. Please let us know if it is, or if it isn't. Again, a bit of the overload warning. Hopefully we can carry on. First, there was always going to be something went wrong with the first one, but I didn't think it'd be this. It's normally me messing about and pressing the wrong buttons or forgetting to go live, but the fact that the hardware isn't holding up is not great. I'm definitely gonna have to get that sorted with the masses of pods we've got coming on. Okay, you also wanted firstly, sorry, just before we move on to promoted teams, I just wanted to have a chat about enablers. So I've got to say, so I haven't done a whole lot of research yet. I've done a bit, but I'll be doing it. I'm away on holiday next week, so I'll be kind of sitting by the pool with my iPad and stuff, and and doing a lot of research and things. But in terms of enablers, I found it quite tough at the moment to find 2 or 3 midfielders or defenders, for example, who could do a really good job tackle bonus wise. Yates was probably the one we saw, right? He looked to be kind of nailed on to play, a little bit underpriced, but it looks like he's going to miss the start of the season. Have you spotted any others at the moment who who got your eye on?
I think this is another example of why Sky's priced players really well. Like they've increased the base of finding a playing player for the cheapest, like when it was down at the high 5s or low 6s, and I think the cheapest players, the starting players that I've found, are around about 6.5, a couple at 6.4, and a few higher than that. I do like Paulinho from Fulham. He played, I think it was 27 games last season, scored 3 goals, averaged 3 tackles per game. He was playing for Fulham today, and they did pay, I think it was 18 million for him. So he comes in at 6.6, I think, but it's really, he's going to play in a defensive midfielder role. Yes, he might pick up the tackling bonus, but he might get booked a lot. And my preferred formation, definitely 5-3-2, mentioned it before. It does lead to a little bit of inflexibility, because your first transfer, if you're swapping formation, always has to be a defender out. But with 5-3-2, I wouldn't want to be putting a budget midfielder in that if something happens and I want to get rid of, that I would have to move directly to another budget midfielder when there's perhaps not going to be anyone that emerges at that price. Yeah. So it does, for me, it feels a trap if you're going 5-3-2, but Paulinho could be a good option if sitting on a kind of 4-5-1 or 4-4-2 formation. Forrest's new signing up front, ex-Liverpool boy, he's 7 million. He could be good value. And I know that Kamara's 6.8 from Aston Villa. Yeah. I think he impressed on his debut, but there's nothing much more there than potential tackle bonus. So again, it's whether you're happy picking up the kind of 2, 3, maybe even 4 points average per game without having any spikes at all. It doesn't feel like he's got even the attacking threat of a Norgard, who's doing well at set pieces, on top of his consistent tackle bonus.
Good stuff. Okay, you wanted to have a chat about the promoted teams, Paul. Take it away.
Yeah, so I was looking at the past 3 seasons and seeing how the top goal scorer for each of the promoted sides fared in their first season in the Premier League. So back in the 18-19 season, Norwich, Sheffield United and Aston Villa were all promoted. So for Norwich, Pukki scored 29 goals. Following season in the Premier League, scored 11. I think I think 11 or 12 is kind of like, I would consider that a good return. Anything less, it's probably not going to interest me from a fantasy perspective. Sheffield United was Billy Sharp. He scored 23 goals. He only scored 3 in the Premier League, didn't play too much. Tammy Abraham scored 26. He went back to Chelsea and scored 15 goals for Chelsea, so perhaps he's not the best. Perhaps removing him from the from the analysis probably makes sense. So 1920 season, Leeds promoted. Bamford scored 16. He actually scored more goals the following season in the Premier League, funnily enough. West Brom, it was Charlie Austin and Hal Robson-Kanu, who both scored 10 in the Championship, and neither really made an impact in the Premier League, and both ended up getting loaned out further on through the season. And then I had Fulham, so Mitrovic scored 26 goals, and then he only scored 3 in the Premier League the following season. And then moving on to the 2021 Championship season, we had Pukki got promoted again with Norwich, scored 26 goals, and then scored 11 in the Premier League. So again, he repeated his 11. So I would class that as a success. Watford, Ismail Assar scored 13 in the Championship, then scored 5 in the Premier League. And Ivan Toney for Brentford scored 33 in the Championship, and then in the Premier League went on to score 12. So I would say that Ivan Toney, Bamford, and Timo Pukki twice were relative success. So what's that? 4 out of 9, 4 out of 8 maybe if I take away the Tammy Abraham situation. So I guess there is value to be had in picking one of those players perhaps as your budget enabler. So this season would be your Brennan Johnson. I think he scored 18 goals last season and was on penalties. So you'd mentioned him earlier on, Fergi. And the other options would be Mitrovic again, who only scored 3 the last time he came up. You got to think that he's probably, like, even if he starts the season off poorly, I think that he'll be in that Fulham side. And then you've got Dominic Solanke from Bournemouth. If I was picking one of them, Mitrovic is going to be the favourite, but 7.7, I don't know that that's not a little bit expensive for players that aren't really like a style of player, top goal scorer from a Championship side that's coming up. Even if you look at Ivan Toney last year, he finished near the top of the point scoring charts, but he got 7 Man of the Match awards, so that was 21 points. And then I remember we all captained him on the first day of the season, so that was one of his Man of the Match points, so that was doubled. So if you think about all the points that we're picking up for the Man of the Matches, I'm kind of on the fence a little bit. I wouldn't steer anyone away from picking one of those players, but for me, having like a Brennan Johnson and perhaps a Mitrovic and a Solanke or another Championship level striker, it's maybe a bit poor to call him Championship level striker, but a striker coming up from one of the Championship side, I would maybe steer away from them.
Yeah, it's interesting. And I suppose the difference obviously this year to last year is, Son, Salah, etc. have gone back as midfielders as well. So there's actually a bit more kind of room up front, wasn't there, as there wasn't last year. We didn't often go to that freemium route, but if you wanted to go Kane, Salah, and Ronaldo last year for for a time, wasn't it? But yeah, it's definitely free. I never really, I say that I've picked some right plongers up front before, but I don't think I've ever really gone for I'm trying to think, a promoted team striker, maybe for like an odd captaincy, but I do wonder this year, just by looking at the lack of budget enablers I can currently see. Obviously, we'll learn more, right? We're still like 2.5 weeks to the start of the season. There could be an injury to someone, if Zinchenko goes to Arsenal and Muti's going to start every week, suddenly there's an 8 million player, kind of unlocked there, which would be good. And maybe, you may not need 2 really sort of cheap enablers, but it's really good to keep an eye on these sorts of players. Johnson for me is the one I think I'm interested in. I think the fact that he's a midfielder as well, you can almost just hide him away, and even if he scores kind of 7 or 8 goals this season, I think for his price, just hidden away, he may do a fairly decent job, and he's going to go on a spell where he maybe scores a brace, maybe gets a goal, golden assist or something, which you probably wouldn't get from many other enablers. Really good stuff there, Paul. Thanks for that analysis. And on to bonus magnets.
Yeah, so I guess it goes without saying that when players come up from the Championship, you perhaps expect their average passing to go down slightly because they're playing against better opposition, and their average shots per game to go down again because they're playing against better opposition. But from a tackle perspective, I think it's always a thought that, well, you should get those players that tackle should get a higher tackle rate because they're playing against better opposition. So I started thinking about it, and is that definitely the case, or is it that they'll be nowhere closer enough to the ball to make any tackles? And I really didn't know the answer to the question. So what I wanted to do is look at 4 players that have come up from the Championship over the last 2 or 3 seasons that have done really well for tackle bonus in the Premier League, and what did their tackle bonus, or what was their tackle stats like for in the Championship prior to coming up. The example you mentioned, Ryan Yates earlier on. So he was 6.5, 44 games for Nottingham Forest last season, scored 8 goals. Every time I watched him, he looked a bit of a menace at set pieces as well. He averaged 1.9 tackles per game. And I've seen a thread on Twitter or something like that saying, oh, well, that doesn't really stand out as something that would be good for the Sky tackle bonus. You need to achieve four tackles to get bonus. So I've looked at Norgard, McGinn, Dallas and Ayling, who have all done well for tackle bonus in the Premier League since coming up, and looked at their history. So first, I'll leave Norgard to last because I guess he's most kind of in our minds from being last season. So Ayling's his last Championship season, he only averaged 1.8 tackles per game in the 35 games he played. And in the 2 Premier League seasons since, he's averaged 2.8 tackles per game. So we've seen him pick up tackle bonus. That's those stats back that up. But again, in the Championship, it was only 1.8. So if you're looking at thinking he wouldn't get regular bonus in the Premier League, it's changed a bit. Dallas, in his last season in the Championship, 2.2. Then 1.9 in the Premier League, and then 2.7 in the Premier League the following season. So first season did take a little bit of dip. And that was the season that everyone had him, and he's doing well, but he scored a few goals and he got assists as well. So maybe he didn't do as well for tackle bonus as what I had in my mind.
But he was playing all over the place. He was like if he's playing at right back, he's probably not going to get as many opportunities at tackles as he is like in centre midfield, for example, is he? And
then John McGinn, so in his last season in the Championship, I think he only did 1 season in Championship for Villa, 2.1 tackles per game. In the following two seasons of the Premier League, kind of dropped off quite a bit, so 1.9, 1.6. And then last season, he was almost rivaling Norgard in terms of his tackles per game, so three tackles per game, and picked up quite a bit of bonus last season, McGinn. And then looking at Norgard, so Norgard was the most interesting for me, and he'll be fresh in everyone's mind. I think he made the most successful tackles out of everyone in the Premier League. I think Cancelo was up there, but I could be wrong. But he definitely was up there, and he was top at one point. So in the Championship in 1920, he made 2.7 tackles per game, so that looks pretty strong. Last season in the Championship, he did only play 16 games, but he was only averaging 1.7 tackles per game. So I wouldn't have looked at that, and if I'd been looking at that season in isolation, thinking, oh, he's going to come up and absolutely smash it in the Premier League. And then last season, 35 games, 3.1 tackles per game. So I definitely think that there is trends that increasing by around about 1 tackle per game, and looking at those players that do make a lot of tackles. If you factor that into any kind of model that you've got for trying to base value around players, is a fair assumption. So I guess in summary, if Yates was available at the start of the season, I would suspect his 1.9 tackles per game would increase quite a bit. And I'm not saying I would definitely pick him, but it does suggest that he would pick up the odd tackle bonus to go along with appearance points and perhaps odd attacking returns as well.
Lovely stuff. Just to catch up with the chat. Darren says Dyer looks more nailed for bonus than Romero. I do think a double up is not out of the question there. Just in terms of their price, you also expect Spurs to improve again under Conte. Fixtures are pretty good. Bert says like Dyer with Bissouma sat in front of him. It's going to be interesting to see who drops out for Spurs in midfield out of Højbjerg, Bissouma and Bentancur, because Bentancur was playing really well at the end of last season as well, so it'll be interesting to see what happens there. Craig Smart says Christensen looks good for 7.2, good early fixtures, and Steve's cheek, Camera for Villa 6.8. Amandeep says thinks Forest have got the best enablers, Henderson, McKenna, Nico Williams, Johnson, and their new striker. Darren says could get Fofana or Botman for that price. Haven't really looked at those, to be honest. Botman is obviously Newcastle's new sign. You expect them to be quite decent this season as well. And Ian says Forest also the only side currently with back-to-back Monday night and Friday night games will have one of them, if not now. I would expect. So moving on nicely from that, actually, we did have we had loads of questions. Thank you so much, everyone, for those who sent them in. We're obviously not going to be able to get through all of them, but I've tried to pick out a few of the trends, and one of them was off Ian, actually. Really good question was about how far to plan ahead when building a Game Week 1 team, because this is quite new to us all in Sky, right? Because I think the first overhaul has been in for, 3 or 4 seasons now, so anyone who's played... anyone who's only played a season or two are not going to be used to having to build their team for, the first half of the season. So what are your early thoughts on how far to plan ahead, Paul?
Yeah, well I'd mentioned a tactic that I think that I'm going to deploy, in that I'm going to just look to the first 3 games, and then I won't be picking players from poorer sides that don't have any base points. So if I'm looking at any defenders, I never pick a defender based on fixtures anyway. I pick them on value, consistency in which they hit tiers, and then clean sheet potential, even more so than attacking threat. So when I say I'll be picking my team for the first 3 weeks, that'll be perhaps setting up with any of the single game days, the Forest game day, and then just the players that return bonus often. But I won't be against making some switches between heavy hitting attackers to take punts on captaincy options, and also making 2 or 3 moves perhaps after 2 or 3 weeks, getting one enabler in that I think is going to do really well this season that kind of emerges from that period of time, and also just to kind of reshape my team so that I then build the team after 3 game weeks that'll last me another 5 or 6 game weeks.
I'm quite surprised you said that, to be honest. I would have thought, again, just looking at it as a Telegraph game, because it's incredibly similar now. When I set it for the Telegraph, I know you're the same. We don't really look at the early fixtures. Obviously, you need a captaincy. That goes without saying. But I think the way I'm going to set up my team is just going to be to pick the best Sky assets that I think obviously who offer really good value. Not really look at fixtures other than captaincy. But like Van Dijk is probably a good example of he's going to be a superb Sky asset this season. I don't care what his fixtures are like. I think Liverpool's are pretty decent, but regardless if they weren't, I think I would have him in because he's the kind of player who can score well in any game anyway. And once you have him, you won't get rid of him, will you? But I think I'm definitely going to pick probably 9 or 10 of my team are going to be just looking at the Sky players, and then obviously you need to if it's a Forest player, for example, you need a captaincy for a certain day. Maybe Jesus on game week 1 is someone which depends on his ownership is when you're going to have. But yeah, I think quite differently there. I don't know.
Well, I don't know. I think that I'm saying the same as you, and that I agree. So say we had 8 or 9 players that you'd expect to be in your team for long periods. That those 2 or 3 players, I would pick maybe around the 7 to 8 million mark, or perhaps I go for 1 budget enabler and 2 a little bit more expensive to balance out the team, and pick those based on fixtures for the first 3 weeks. And whilst making a couple of heavy hitter changes to take care of the captaincies, then use those three positions to restructure. Perhaps the one enabler comes out and then the 2 sevens go up to 8s, because there's a couple other bonus magnets that have emerged at that point.
Yeah, that's fair. Dan asked, what about Jesus on the opening night? So as it stands, obviously, Jesus has looked pretty sharp in pre-season. All the comments from Arteta are incredibly positive about him playing really up front in that number 9 role. I would probably guess to be on penalties as well. That is just a guess. I don't know, but what are your thoughts, Paul, on Jesus for game week 1? Bear in mind, I don't really massively fancy him for away to Palace on the opening week. He may get a goal, right? But the fixtures after are very good for Arsenal, aren't they? So I was looking at his price and thinking, if you have him for game week 1, maybe you can move him on after a week or two. But they have quite a few decent fixtures. But 9.5 million, I think that's a lot of money to put on Jesus, bearing in mind the man of the match has gone. Because as I say, even if he scores his goal now, 7 points, 8 points maybe, is probably his ceiling, even if he gets his goal. What do you think?
So I'd thought about starting with Gabriel instead of Gabriel Jesus.
Yeah. There's a lot of Gabbies in it.
the 3 Gabriels play for Arsenal, right?
I think there's 4. Isn't there 4? Have I just made that up? I'm sure there was 4. Anyway, it don't matter.
But they priced him really, really well this season. It's just over 9. And he picked up 4 man of the matches as well, Gabriel, last season. So if you start taking that off his season total, it perhaps doesn't look as great as it does on the surface. He still would have then scored 184 points. So it is pretty good. I don't know, Palace isn't a great game for picking up passing bonus in as well. And it kind of put me off Gabriel having the Arsenal player in there for the captaincy. I just think on that ownership point in isolation, I'm a kind of low risk kind of Sky fantasy player, so I probably will start with Jesus because his ownership's over 40% just now, and I reckon what Dan's saying, I reckon it'll be more like 60% on the opening day of the season.
Obviously, have to bear in mind that is the population of Sky managers, and obviously a lot of them don't tune into this podcast. But I'm not so sold at the moment, just because even if he gets his goal and gets a couple of shot bonus, it's only 14 points, and his fixtures are reasonably favourable. I think it's probably fair to say, but it's a lot of money, I think, for an Arsenal forward. Arsenal are pretty decent going forward, but Aubameyang was a bit different maybe a couple of seasons ago, but more recently they haven't been, renowned for their goal scoring capabilities. I do wonder whether that 9.5 million could go on. I'm sure there's plenty of central defenders who would hoover a passing bonus every week.
Who would you consider? Is it in any universe would you consider going without an Arsenal player?
I don't think I'd go without an Arsenal player, because I do think that the centre-backs are probably really good value anyway. And defensively, I think they're okay, even though they finished the season, pretty poor in defence. I don't think they had a clean sheet. Did they? They may have had like one in the last kind of 8 game weeks or something. But I like the Gabriel shout. I missed him last season, and he's always on the pass. He's quite dangerous off corners as well, and I think he scored a couple of headers. I think he scored in his debut, didn't he? Did he score in his debut? I can't remember.
Against Fulham on opening day of the season.
Yeah, I just think even if Jesus gets his goal, and gets 7 points, say, right? Gabriel concedes, but gets passing bonus, which he may or may not against Palace. That's still 4 or 5 points, and you're going to want to hold Gabriel probably longer term than you would Jesus. I think that man of the match thing is quite big.
Doubled.
Yeah.
Double.
Yeah. So 7 to 14 is 5 to 10. It's only 4 points difference. And as we know, when we look back at our seasons at the end of the season, we looked at these moves that we simply have to do them. But we know, right, that 4 points, 6 points, 8 points, 10 points is not gonna define your start or even your season. Like, it's gonna need Jesus to score a brace to kind of really set the world alight there. But anyway, just
it might, but it might also be a structure thing though.
It's fair.
I made the example earlier on saying that I still think 5-3-2 is the best formation. Will I start with it? Not 100% sure, but in my latest draft, I'm on 5-3-2. And we're talking about premiums. I said I'll definitely start with Salah, so I don't think that's giving away anything.
Insight.
And
Hashtag insight.
And he's a midfielder now, as is Son, if I was to start with Son. So to fit into a 5-3-2 formation, it might be easier to fit Gabriel Jesus in than it would be to fit Gabriel in as well. It sounds strange because there's 5 spots for defenders and 2 for strikers. I'm just not convinced that I would want 2 strikers from the pool of strikers, knowing that I would have Salah midfield, and I've already talked about only having 2 premium attackers.
Fair. A few other questions we had around Haaland. We had quite a few around Haaland and what do we think of him? Obviously away to West Ham on the Sunday, I believe. I don't know his ownership, but I'm guessing it's probably incredibly high. Obviously home to Bournemouth, I think, the following weekend as well, which is probably what people have more got their eye on. But what are your initial thoughts on Haaland, and specifically against Kane and Son, bearing in mind Salah is probably a lock?
Yeah. It's a tough decision. I think that he's well equipped to fit well into the Premier League. I don't think that you've got that bedding in aspect that you've got others about, like learning a different language, learning the pace. I think his style and physique will fit in well in the Premier League as well. It's frustrating that you can't see starting lineups. I mean, he could easily start on the bench against West Ham, or there was a few Twitter rumours that he was injured just now, but then someone else said he was in training yesterday. So I'm not sure what truth there is to come out of that. But what would be interesting for me is if it's kind of Haaland or a Cancelo, like, where's the balance there? I'm not like, I don't often sit on the fence, but I'm really not sure.
Who would you captain away to West Ham, Haaland or Cancelo?
If I had both of my team, I'd probably captain Haaland, but only because I think he'll be more captained by more people.
Fair enough.
It worked last season.
It did work last season, even though you stuck around 30th for all season. It did work, to be fair. I know you won all your mini leagues, didn't you? Okay. Have you got any final points at all, Paul, that you've picked out of the questions, or you've got anything else to share at all? Because one resolution we're going to try and do this season, try and keep every podcast under an hour if we can, and not waffle. Yeah. So what's your thinking, Paul? Is there anything else you want to kind of finish up with?
Yeah, so defenders, I've mentioned this before. I like a base point up, like a starting point from defenders of kind of 4 or 5 points from passing bonus as opposed to 2. So there was a question about Fofana. I think if Fofana comes out, like, Leicester's not in Europe this season, so if it does look like Fofana's first choice for Leicester, I think that he'll be brilliant value. I think he's at 7.4 or 7.5. The other teams, we've discussed some of this before, the other teams that often get bonus outside of the big teams would be Brighton, although that did tail off at the end of last season, and I think it's because they moved to a back 4 instead of back 5. So that'll be interesting to see how they line up, and whether or not I've always liked Lewis Duncan, Sky Fantasy Football. I think he's always served me well when I've won them.
I think 7.9 is quite cheap as well, isn't it? And he's got real attacking threat as well, hasn't he?
Yeah, but then I don't see him in that many Twitter drafts. I know that there's a Twitter bubble, but if you look at the end of last season and where he was getting bonus, he wasn't picking up too much bonus. I think Brighton's a team that I want to keep my eye on, as is Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace have really poor opening fixtures, but I think that Gehi at 8 million and Joshua Anderson at 7.9 million will be good value over the course of the season. Yeah. That could be a move that I do as one of those correction ones that I mentioned. Like, it's not probably going back on what I said, because I said I wasn't playing fixtures, but the fact that their fixtures are so bad to start with, that I would rather use the budget elsewhere to feel things out, and then move to a Palace defender around that price bracket. So Leicester, Crystal Palace, and Brighton are the three teams that I probably won't start with one of the players, or it's likely that I won't start with one of the players, but one defences that I think could come good very quickly, and hence I'd want to make the jump on quickly. I think it would also be differentials.
Perfect stuff. Thank you, Paul. And to finish up, I'll put you on the spot. I'm not going to ask you to name your draft, but could you give us a kind of rough indication of what your team sort of structure looks like at the moment? You said like 5-3-2. How many premiums have you got, and what's the general sort of structure of your team?
Yeah, 5-3-2, 2 premiums, solid defence of those that pick up, are expected to pick up bonus, and then 1 budget midfielder. I've got, so the one difference, so people wonder like how can you make that squad with 100 million, and it's the fact that on the premiums I've went a little bit up. I've trimmed off the top of the premiums almost, if you like. So I've got 4 or 5 defenders that I think will be really good for bonus, but they're perhaps not as expensive as the Van Dijks and Cancelos.
Oh, that's interesting. And you say this all the time, Paul, and you're probably right. It's hilarious because we don't really want to kind of share our teams per se, but judging by the commentary of what you just said, I've already got probably a pretty good idea of like probably eight of your team based on what.
I don't mind people working out my team from listening to us jibber jabber on for an hour or an hour and a half. But yeah, I'm not a kind of like team reveal type content creator.
Fair enough. Thank you so much, Paul. Just to say that I'm on holiday next week. I know I shouldn't be on holiday a week before the season starts, but obviously, I say obviously you wouldn't know. We've had this holiday planned for like a couple of years. Obviously, been bounced on, and I had a big argument with my family who were coming, my extended family, around I can't go in August. So we we compromised. I go the last week of July, thinking the season would start second week in August as it normally does, and obviously it starts a week early. So I am off next week. So what we're planning from a Sky Pod view for the next couple of weeks, I come back on Sunday the 31st of July. So Monday the 1st of August, which is 2 weeks today, we will do a pod in the day. We will obviously look at, we'll know a lot more by that point, right? It will be 4 days from the kickoff. So we will do a pod on Monday the 1st of August in the day, and we will also do a bonus pod on Thursday the 3rd of August in the day as well, just to make sure that we get the absolute last minute up to date information, and share as much as we possibly can. So thank you so much for everyone who's joined us today. We've had a packed lobby. Great to see so many of you back with us this year. We have missed you. Thank you so much. Your continued support is much appreciated. Paul, where can people find you?
On Twitter at Paul McAnulty1, MCANULTY.
My handle on Twitter is at FFH_Fergi. So this podcast and video will be on the Fantasy Football Hub, Sky and TFF YouTube channel. We'll also be recording a TFF video hopefully this week as well. So that will be on this channel as well. Also available on all major podcast platforms. Don't forget, please press like, please subscribe if you haven't already. Our handles on Twitter, Instagram and TikTok are at FFH_HQ. You can also find us, Paul and I, at FFH_Sky. Please follow. Our website is fantasyfootballhub.co.uk. You can get 50% off now, the very best fantasy resources around. Don't forget, if you play FPL and you don't win your FPL mini league, you will get your money back. T's and C's apply, but go and take a look at that. 50% off now. All our plans, half price. Go and join up to the hub if you haven't already. You don't know what you're missing. You will win your mini leagues. It is as simple as that. As I've already mentioned, we'll be back on Monday the 1st and Thursday the 4th of August. We'll delve into more detail then. Until then, stay safe. Apologies for the video. I need to get that fixed this week. But stay safe and goodbye for now.